What is up, everybody? Welcome to the TDR Show. Me and Jay Stein here with you talking Devy again. We're diving into our Devy rankings this month. Last week, we talked to quarterbacks. Go check that out. I know Devy's not always going to be the biggest thing here on YouTube, but go check it out. Learn a little bit more from the Dynasty perspective of guys who are coming there. Today, we're talking running backs, man. This is a tough position for the Devy community to kind of gauge. There's a lot of different guys that left, and now it kind of leaves a vacuum in there. So we're going to go through our top 10. We're doing some player profiles, some guys that we like, and we're diving into our freshman ranks. So we got those uploaded over there. I've got them uploaded in our Patreon and our combined Devy and Dynasty rankings now. So we're going to talk about them. I have a fun one at one for me, the guy that I absolutely love. So you need to hang out to the episode till you get to that guy. But we're going to be diving into our running backs. Stick here after the intro. All right, let's talk running back draft strategy. So last week we talked about quarterback draft strategy. This week I'm talking running back draft strategy. And with the kind of reemergence of the dynasty running back landscape, I think we're starting to see a little bit of resurgence in the Devy running back landscape. But just in general, you want to identify the top tier. That's why we're here. We're going to talk about some of the top guys, those top 5 guys that you want to get in your roster. And the reason why you want to identify those guys is because you're hoping that they accumulate value, right? It's not just keeping them on your roster, but identifying them. Hey, can I draft these guys and where their value's at? And do I think that they're going to keep improving, right? That production. Are they going to have that Ashton Genty type rise? That's what you kind of look for there. Follow the traits. So for me, it's always about, hey, explosiveness, miles per hour. Do they have good pass catching? Are they good, run pass blockers? Can they get out on the outside on the edge? Can they do the things that you like to see from an NFL level perspective? So I always say follow the traits. Like, hey, does that guy pop off to me as an NFL guy? And if you're doing this long enough, that's how our rankings are. It's like, hey, yeah, this guy could definitely be an NFL day 2 guy, right? We can follow the traits all the way to the 3rd round and draft all you want, but that's not going to help us. Can they be a day 2 guy or possibly a day 1 kid? Late round values are always there at the running back spot because there's so many of them that there's always guys that just pop off. Even Ashton Genty, you could have considered a value last year. Like some people didn't have them in the top 5 running backs, and he continued to kind of rise up boards. And then you get him later rounds. Even like our late round value could be a 2nd round in Devy. It just depends on kind of when you're drafting these guys. But there's always guys like that. Javonte Williams before his breakout. Even to extent with Gibbs, when Gibbs went to Georgia Tech. I mean, remember when he was getting kind of value a little bit later. And freshman running backs get value late all the time. So there's always opportunity to draft some of these stud freshman running backs in the 4th, 5th round, 6th round, 7th round. And then also the next year after a great freshman year, their 2nd round picks, right? And then understand their volatility, right? So understand that they are volatile assets too. So you have to be, in my opinion, with the running backs, you have to move them if you can. I think it's always about tearing up, trying to get dynasty guys, but understanding not investing too much capital in the running back position. So when they're so volatile, I'll go take my stab at a couple guys, but I'm not loading up on running backs for every pick. I'm understanding that validity comes with a lot of risk. I still will lean wide receiver in most cases there, but it's okay to take some stabs at some guys. Just make sure you parse it out a little bit. Don't draft all the running backs on your Devy roster. Give yourself flexibility. What do you think about these? And do you want to add anything, Jay?
Yeah, and for the data stuff, I like them. And for the data stuff, I just add there's a few metrics I look at: yards per team play, rush yards over expected per attempt, and then I also look at receiving market share. And then I just also add I do have a weight sort of cutoff for my thing. So when I'm going out and looking at Devy, I'm looking at 205, 208-ish or higher. That's really kind of where I want to see if a player now we're talking Devy, so they can actually, this is a time in their life where they can actually gain weight. So when you go and look at those freshmen, that's not what they're going to be by the time they go through a college weight program. And so you kind of see where their frame is and see how much you think that they can probably put on. But really, when I'm trying to find that NFL level type of guy, I'm looking for guys that can get or will get to that over 205, 208 range. But that's kind of how I look at it.
If there's anybody that knows about gaining weight in college, it's this guy, Kevin Coleman. We learned pretty quickly that those extra 10 and 15 pounds, when you're eating beer or drinking beer and eating pizza for like your entire freshman year, that will come at you fast. Life comes at you fast. I know Jay's just a hater. He hates his under 200 guys. Like he just know that as we get into it. But those are good. I mean, and that's the thing too. I'm glad you brought it up. Receiving to me is the everything in terms of fantasy to me in PPR when you're looking at kind of like how the dynasty finished in running backs there. Like if these guys can show that, that's going to vault you up my board a little bit. And it's probably why I made some adjustments to our boards a little bit as we go through our rankings here in a minute. Because if you can catch passes and you could be an early down guy, I want that 3-down package in Devy. Like if you're looking from a Devy standpoint, give me that 3-down guy that's not a special guy, not a specialty guy, right? He's a special player that can be a 3-down kid. That gives me more value because the guy's going to look at that and say, hey, I can do that. Like Ashton Genty type. Those are the types that you look at and say, hey, that's the most value I can get. And I think of this. Ashton Genty is now getting valued as a 101 right now in rookie drafts in most spots. Tedero McMillan is right there as well. If you drafted him in whatever round you did, second or third, look how much value you just accumulated there, right? Trayvon Henderson bounced back finally. Like there's guys there that have it. And usually the guys that bounce back, if they kind of have a fall, like in their sophomore year, are the 3-down guys or the guys that you say can have 3-down workloads. So that's definitely where it's in there. All right, let's get to the meat. Let's talk about our rankings. Again, we're going to start at 10. We're going to work our way up here. We're going to profile a couple of these guys, give you guys some of our takes. Jay, here's his 6 through 10. So we're going to start at the bottom, work our way up. He's got 10, James Peoples. And if you're watching on YouTube, I have when they're coming out. So 2027 is their draft class. James Peoples is an Ohio State Buckeye, has an opportunity. I'm sure Jay will talk about it because anytime he has a chance to talk about Ohio State, he'll talk about it. Opportunity to really be their running back 1/2 this year with a big opportunity ahead. At number 9, we have Jonah Coleman, who could have came out this year in 2025 at Washington. At 8, he's got Jay Knott from Cal at 2025. And I thought I was going to be the high guy at Knott. Caden Durham, LSU running back. He's in 27 class. And then CJ Baxter, Texas running back, towards ACL last year, should be bouncing back in a 26 class. On the flip end, for me, at 10, I have Jay Knott. I love Jay Knott from Cal. I think that he had the high sprained ankle that I went to. I kind of jinxed him. I went to that game, he got injured, so I blame myself for his season. Jaden Bach, I think is how you say his name, at Florida, 2027 class. I have him at 9. Jay does not have him in his top 10. CJ Baxter, I have at 8. Quentin Martin Jr., it should be junior there, not just Jay, at a Penn State running back. He's going to be a sophomore. He's in the 27 class. And I have Caden Durham at 6. So I'm a little higher on Caden Durham from LSU at 2027. All right, Jay, who you want to talk about first? What do you want to talk about? James Peoples, you just going to go there?
Yeah, we'll start with James Peoples, 5'10", 203. This will be his second year. Last year, he played sparingly behind the two-horse Ohio State rushing attack there, and Quinshon Judkins and Trayvon Henderson, who both are now going off into the NFL, and both are viewed as, two of the top at the running back position in terms of rookies from that perspective. So they should be day 2, day 3 type running backs, or early day 3, probably day 2 type running backs. And so, who's going to come and step up here in Ohio State's rushing game? Well, Peoples, I thought of him highly coming out of high school, but it looks like is going to get that first crack to be that starting running back. And I think that he is a very promising back.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what Ohio State did this season was they got a transfer from CJ Donaldson from West Virginia. He is a 6'2" back, 238 pounds, really bruiser. And if you pair him with Peoples-Jones, I think this could be another really interesting Ohio State backfield. The other thing they do is they brought in 2 running backs, freshman running backs this year, which I think have really high potential. Bo Jackson and Anthony Rogers. And I think that this backfield is going to be another really, really good backfield for Ohio State, and hopefully gets led by Peoples-Jones. So I think there's a lot of upside there from him going forward.
Yeah, I like James Peoples' call. He's right there for me. He's at 12, so I'm not that far behind there. I think him and Jordan Marshall are going to be fun to watch at Michigan too. I think those two guys came in with some little bit of rivalry against each other coming out of kind of high school too. Kind of same thing. I think that Marshall just has a better player that maybe transferred ahead of him, so we'll talk about him a little bit. But I like the Peoples' call. I mean, when you're looking at Ohio, so another thing too with Devy, and just in general, like rankings. All right, he goes to Ohio State. Is he going to be on freaking national stage every week? Yes. And so if he performs, his value goes up. This is a simple game. It's a simple game, understanding that. And I think he can. And like I told Jay pre-show, we were talking about Peoples a little bit. if it was someone else that transferred there, I like Donaldson, but he's really a 1B bruiser type. Peoples is a 1A. So, like, he can do it all there. So, I think he's going to get run. Now, we're going to talk about a freshman I absolutely love later. I think is going to get some run too. But that's a great call there too. I'll talk about the guy that's not on your board just so we can kind of knock those off. Jaden Bach. I know someone's going to get in the comments and yell at me there. But he's a freshman out of Florida. I put him at 9. I thought he had a pretty good year this year. 133 carries, 673 yards, 7 touchdowns. For a freshman, sitting at 6'1", 227. So we know if Jay likes his weight, he likes that, because when you're looking at just kind of where he's at, he's a bruiser, but he can move too. He's got quick feet. I like that. I think from just a receiving standpoint, you'd like to see a little bit more. Only 4 catches. So that's definitely one of his knocks to his profile. But again, if you're looking at the depth chart, he's it. He's their guy. Like, you're going through here. Jacoby Jackson is there. He's a transfer. He's a senior. He's probably their 2. You got Trayon Webb there. You got Katie Daniels there. But it's Jaden. Jaden's their dude. And when you're looking at it from that perspective, I'm all aboard the Jaden train. I think that he's a phenomenal player. I think he's going to get a ton of usage, a ton of volume there. And so shout out to Florida Gators, because I think with DJ Lagway as well, I think that's going to be a fun offense. Again, I think Florida's going to be very good. So you're talking about a guy that can get some run there. So give me Jaden Bach.
Yeah, he looks good, and you're pairing him with DJ Lagway, so that could be a really nasty backfield there for you gotta when you're playing them, you kind of got to focus on both of those guys coming out of the backfield, which is pretty interesting thing. So yeah, I like Jaden Baugh too. The next guy I wanted to hit on was Jonah Coleman, is kind of a numbers sort of darling. He's 5'9", 229. He looks all that 229.
Yeah.
He's very stout type runner. This is his 4th year. I wish he came out this year, but this is his 4th year. After his 2nd year, he transferred from Arizona to Washington. So this was his 1st year at Washington. The numbers are just incredible for him. PFF every single year, PFF rush grade above 86. So 1st year 86.7, 2nd year 93.4. 3rd year, 87.2. He's got a huge elusive rating. He's got lots of missed tackles forced. He's got lots of yards after contact. This is a really good back. The issue that I see coming out with him is, what does the NFL think of him? Does he have the NFL level traits to be that guy in the NFL, or is he more of the sort of that complementary thing? But this is, is he athletic enough is a question, but numbers-wise, he looks really good, has looked really good for his entire college career. So I really like him. I think if he came out this year, he would be like one of my guys that has like favorite sleeper type of guys, because I think he's that interesting. But, another year at Washington, we'll see what he does. I think, he's done nothing but do really good things, but we'll just see what the NFL thinks of him next season.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good call. I'm going to piss some people off in our Discord because I don't have him in my top 10. He's close, everybody. So please don't come at me, Sachi. Okay, I know you're watching and listening, and you're going to be yelling at me because you're a Washington guy. I think the thing that stands out to me the most about him is his missed tackles force and his elusive rating. Like, he can definitely do that. And if we see that for another year, I think, yeah, he's going to have that production. To me, he's a tweener right now on draft capital. So I think he's day 2/day 3. And I think that's why he came back. I think the NFL told him, hey, you're probably a day 3 in this class. And so with next year's class, though, we talked about it. It's kind of open. Like, it is really open in that class there, and he can kind of pop off. The other guy that I want to mention is Jay Knott from Cal. I've been a big Otter guy for like years. So like, I am definitely biased here, but I thought he could have been a top 3 back in this class coming out in 2025, but he did not. He had that sprain of his ankle, right? So when you're talking about him, this is his year 4. But he had an excellent year 1 and 2. Like, he was maybe one of the most underrated backs for 2 straight years. Him and Jonah Coleman and Damian Martinez. They always were like just 2 guys that were always underrated. And when you're looking at what he did as a true freshman at Cal, 897 yards, 8 touchdowns, but also added 321 yards receiving. Last year, 2 years ago, his sophomore year, over 1,300 yards rushing, 12 touchdowns. He still added like almost basically over 1,500 yards total offense in that offense there. He's special. And I'm kind of like one of those guys that I wish he wouldn't have got injured, because I think he would have came out and he would have been great. This year, coming back, hey, what can he be? He's going to be that offense again. Trust me, I've watched tons of Cal football for whatever reason. I just hear I'm in this area, so I go watch it. He's their guy, and I think that he's going to go back to his sophomore level usage, but also if he's healthy, he can still get that production. I think he comes into the season as an underrated prospect, and I do think that we could see him being a top 5 back in his class. Like that's how good he is. So he's a value. He's one of those things when I talked about running back and late round values. He's going to be a late round value. I'm in a Devy mock right now. It's 10 rounds. He has not got drafted yet, and it's through 6. So I'm going to draft him in a minute. Because I'm looking at it like I'm going to grab Ott, but that's the type of profile you're looking for. Down year, not his fault, ankle. Hey, he still had a ton of production. Draft him now later. That's the way to go.
It's never a straight line. We talk about this all the time. You have really ridiculously good performance out of some prospects, and then they have a down year because of injury, because of whatever happens. And everybody goes, it's like, we're going to completely get rid of this guy. And that's not the way it is. It's not a straight line. It zigzags all the way up. And the hope is next year you get some of that magic we saw in year 1 and year 2, and he strings that another final year together there. And then, then you feel much, much better about his profile. But what we're left with from this last year was a lingering injury that, kind of was with him throughout the whole season. And we didn't really see who he was or who we thought we saw from the years 1 and 2. So,
yeah. All right, let's get our profiles. So let's talk about a couple guys here that we wanted to get into. We're going to start with Caden Durham, a fan for both of us. We both like Caden. He came on. Poor Caleb Jackson truthers out there. If you were in Devy last year, Caleb Jackson was supposed to be that next grade back at LSU. Little did we know this man, Caden Durham, 753 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns. He had 28 catches, 206 yards, and 2 touchdowns through the air. He was special for them and didn't get a ton of run, right? When you're looking at attempts wise, he had 2 big games where he actually got over 20 carries. But outside of that, he wasn't getting a ton of usage there, which I think he should have. In a great LSU offense, man, I like him. I know he's a smallish boy. 205, 5'9". I don't know what that weight's going to be, but he's explosive. And when you're looking at just all the numbers, I mean, he's one of the more explosive guys from 10 yards in that I've seen in college football.
Yeah, I mean, this was a big surprise. We all thought Caleb Jackson taking this backfield over. And really the winner out of this backfield this year was Caden Durham. And this is somebody that you get in the Devy supplemental draft in round 4, round 5, round 3, round 4 or 5. So he was a big riser this year. Which is really interesting to see. Last year, his PFF rush grade was 76.8, which is good. His PFF numbers in terms of like yards after contact, missed tackles, force per attempt, breakaway percentage, elusive rating, it wasn't elite. It was sort of adequate, but wasn't elite. I kind of view him as like he's like a smallerish player. He's really, really compact. He's electric, and he's got like sort of his track background. So it's really, really interesting profile. It kind of reminds me from the numbers perspective, and I'm going to go through some of this stuff, but it kind of analytically and play style, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Devin Singletary of what he is. So he's on the age-adjusted basis for year 1. He's above the lines for yards per team play, dominator rating, receptions percentage. When I broke down all these players on a career rush yards over expected per attempt, and he's above a 1 on that. So he's the second best here on our rush yards over expected per attempt out of all these 10 guys that I have here in my top 10. So a really, really good freshman year. This year you have Josh Williams and John Emery, who were sort of those veteran guys that were on the team taking some carries, but they're off. So it's really clearing out the pathway for him to be the guy, sort of paired with that Caleb Jackson. Although Caleb Jackson was sort of the guy that we thought was going to be the leader. At times he came off as sort of less agile, a bit slow type of profile. And Caden Durham really, really shined with his sort of that electric kind of track background there. So I think LSU will be on the national stage again this year. You got Nuss, you got a couple of interesting transfers at wide receiver in Barron Brown and Nick Anderson, and of course returning Aaron Anderson. And so I think they're going to be relevant. I think he'll be on the national stage, and I think he'll get another year to kind of shine here. and sort of maybe push his way up. But this guy was a surprise riser for me, because we all really did think that Caleb Jackson, after he didn't have an incredible freshman season, but he had like incredible moments where he's running over players, and we just kind of thought everybody sort of penciled him in. But really, the winner in this backfield is Caden Durham last year, and I think he's on an upward trajectory if he can keep putting up numbers like this.
Yeah, no, he's on that upward trajectory, right? That's what you're looking for when you talk about it. Great offense, great player. Like it's just the size that you're like, that's why he's not my top 5. Like if he was there, because he doesn't have that. When you're under 200 ish or whatever, if you're around that 205 or 200 mark, everybody's going to use this and it's lazy, but it's true. If you're Gibbs level of talent that pops off and you're like, oh, I could put him in my top 5, because Gibbs was in our top 5 when we had him. Like, we saw the talent and everything that's there. Like to see him a little bit better as a receiver, right? Like, how does that look there? But I think the usage will come. So if the usage comes, you're excited, because if the usage is going to be there, I think he has it. I'd say, here's my hot take with Caden Durham. I think that he could have 1,500 yards from scrimmage next year at LSU as a sophomore. I think that he could, if he gets that, I'm really excited for him. Like, I think that could be something in that offense that we see a little bit. Wide receiver positions kind of at LSU. I mean, we're always looking for that next guy in that offense there. And I know they got some transfers, and I know they've done it, but I think Caden Durham could be maybe their best weapon. So let's see if he does that. 1,500 yards total offense. Be a high mark. That's definitely a high-end ceiling play there. But I'm excited to see if he can do it. All right, let's talk about a guy that was not in Jay's list. He's a hater. Well, I'm going to do Quentin Martin Jr. from Penn State. And this is based on potential. So this is straight up potential out there, everybody. This is not like production, right? He only played in 4 games, so he kept his red shirt, 32 yards, played behind Singleton and Allen. Gonna do it again. That's the problem, and that's what Jay is going to tell you. And I already know his argument because we've been doing this long enough. But just background for Quentin Martin Jr. He came in as a number 8 running back in 2024. He was a 94 247 sports grade. And when you look at what he did, like when you're talking about like what he did in high school, his senior year, he had 1,000 yards, almost 1,200 yards on only 118 attempts. He had 16 touchdowns. But he also caught 53 passes for over almost 750 yards and 11 touchdowns. He is a 3-down guy. And then if you remember last year, he went off-ish. He had like 2 huge runs in the spring game, and everyone's like, oh, who the hell is this kid? He kind of potted off a little bit. But when you're looking at his yards per carry in high school, he averaged almost 10 yards per carry. The dude was electric. And so the idea is he's coming, he's going to be next. He's next man up. Now, when that next man up is going to be is the question, right? I think that's like, hey, if Allen and Singleton are still there, obviously this year, I don't know how much run he's going to get. He'll probably get more run than that, was what you see on the screen, the 13 attempts. But how much usage can be there? The thing for me is, though, if I'm going to rank him this high, to me, I'm screaming at you guys to say he's a value. Like, he's going to be a guy that gets passed over a little bit because of what Jay's thinking. Jay's going to be like, hey, he's playing behind them. When is that going to come? We still don't know. We've seen guys not pan out before. Just because they're highly ranked, they do good in the spring game. We have seen that. So there's going to be some question marks about him. So I think you jump on it now. You grab him now, because if he's the next guy up once these 2 guys leave after this next year, and again, we're talking about him, I think you can get him cheaper now than you could have next year because of that perceived thinking there. And I think he's that 3-down guy I love. So that he's that 3-down back. I think he's explosive. He has that when he watches the tape there. Runs with very good pad level, very north-south kid, gets up the field quick, no wasted movement, great runner, good football IQ from everything that was told about him in high school. So I'm drafting him now. Like, I'll draft him now, get him as a value, hold on to that. He's an investment to me that I can bet in.
I like getting him as a value. I totally understand getting him as a value. It's just, does he then get to be in my top 10 when James Peoples, who is a freshman, had similar stats, maybe a little bit better stats than him, in a backfield where you had Travion Henderson and Quinshon Junkins, and now those 2 players have moved on, and now you got Peoples Jones, who's got the ability to sort of take over the backfield. And in this situation, you got those 2 high-profile backs staying in the system. My guess is that, again, he might get a little bit more run this year, but unless Penn State's blowing out opponents every week in and week out, I think it's going to be mostly Nick Singleton and Katron Allen for most of this season.
Or one of them gets hurt, and then Martin comes in there and shows that.
Right. Injury.
Which is me moving the goalpost a little bit for argument's sake. But I just think when I look at him, I see traits. They just pop to me when I saw him. When you watch him in high school, man, it was exciting. And I know the spring game's a spring game, and he didn't really have a ton of run that I can say I saw in college. But man, he just reminds me, it's blasphemous to say, but he kind of, when I was watching, so I every year you kind of go through the guys when you're watching them play in high school. And like, that's the thing. I saw Bijan. I'm like, holy shit, who is this kid? And then the next year I'm like, Travion Henderson. Oh my God, this kid is like, who is this kid? And then the next year, and in that same group too, I was like, who the hell is Nicholas Singleton? Like, I really like Nicholas Singleton. I saw it, and then and then last year I turned on the Quentin Martin Jr. tape, and I was like, dang, Quentin Martin Jr. He's got the traits. You see him get to the outside. You see him kind of break those runs that you like to see there, and they're a lot of fun. And so those are the things that you see, and you're like, and you kind of mentally, if you do this long enough, you check the boxes like, oh, hey, if this kid can break away from those high school guys as quickly as he can, has those elite traits, I'm going to build into it and build into the hype. So to me, he's in my top 10. Peoples is right there, and I probably am just a Ohio State hater to get him not in my top 10 right now, but I do think he's very close there. I can tell you, Peoples is a freaking stud on NCAA 25. He's always whooping my butt. So just so you're noted there, but that's kind of, those are the two profiles there. All right, let's get into the top 5 meat here. So let's talk about this so we can get everybody yelling at us. So Jay, here's his top 5. He's got Justice Haynes, the Michigan Wolverines. We got Nate Frazier, 2027, Georgia running back. Jeremiah Love, he's got Notre Dame at 3, running back there. Darius Taylor, Minnesota running back. He's got him at 2. And his number 1 is Nicholas Singleton from Penn State. Now, on the flip end, I have Justice Haynes at 5, New Michigan running back, a former Alabama running back. I have Nicholas Singleton at 4. So that's probably our biggest discrepancy between our rankings here in terms of the top guys. At 3, we both have Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame. At 2, I have Nate Frazier from Georgia, running back. And at 1, my running back 1 right now is Darius Taylor from Minnesota. So what are we thinking about these top 5 rankings here, Jay? What's your first takeaway before we get into 2 profiles?
We didn't talk about CJ Baxter, but I was having a really tough time between Justice Haynes and CJ Baxter. Baxter, we mentioned he had the injury last year, but he had a really good freshman year. And to me, you know how you were talking about Quinyon Martin. To me, coming out of high school, he kind of felt like that guy. Yeah. In fact, he was his freshman year, his true freshman year. He was as a true freshman, he was the day 1 starter for Texas. That had been unheard of. I think the last person to do it was Ricky Williams before him. In a program that generally pumps out incredible incredible running backs into the NFL, he was a true freshman day 1 starter. He ended up getting a little injured, and then Jonathan Brooks came in and went off. Of course, we know what happened with Jonathan Brooks. And then the next season, he was going to be the guy. He was going to be Texas's big part of their offense. Yeah. And it looked like that through all spring. And of course, he gets injured, has season-ending injury. That's the guy. If you take away the injuries, that's the guy that I could see him being in this top 5 over some of these other question marks. And Justice Hayes, for me, I was going back and forth because Justice Hayes didn't necessarily have the greatest of seasons last year. Now you have him transferring to Michigan. I think Michigan's been a great program for running backs to come and have success. They have a offense that's focused on the rushing game, and I think Justice Haynes can succeed this year. And if you take away CJ Baxter's injuries, maybe we're flipping these two. Maybe I even have him higher. But that's sort of the one that was really, really tough for me there at the right around 5.
It is a tough. I like CJ Baxter, but we always know coming off the injury, like, all right, it's going to take a little while to get in there. Justice Haynes. So this is the trait-based Kevin talking, because I've seen Justice Haynes in person. I actually went and watched the Rose Bowl game with Michigan and Alabama. He got 4 carries that game. You know how scared I was those 4 carries, because he just looked different than Michigan's defense, how fast he was. Like, every time he touched the football, you're like, oh, I don't want Justice Haynes to touch the football anymore. Like, can you please not give it to him? And I think that I wanted you to give it to Jace McClellan. Like, I was really like that guy of like, man, that guy is special. And when you saw it, and it was only 4 attempts, and I know that's crazy to say, but when you're watching him, you're just like, gosh, this guy is special. I just think something hasn't panned out. I think the first year he was going to be good. I think and he looked pretty good in the usage that he got. I think if Saban would have came back last year, I think Justice Haynes stays at Alabama, and I think he has over 1,000 yards rushing, because whatever that scheme was, it just did not fit for him in DeBoer's offense, and I think that was a big thing of it. Because if you go back to his high school, and you look at the numbers in high school, in his senior year, he had 1,600 yards rushing and 23 touchdowns and over 200 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns there. His junior year, he had 2,300 yards rushing and 29 rushing touchdowns. His sophomore year, he had 1,700 yards rushing. And his freshman year of high school, he had 1,700 yards and 18 touchdowns. He was dominant in high school, excuse me. And he's also got a little bit of a NFL pedigree. His dad was a Georgia running back. He got selected in the 5th round by the Steelers in 2002, Baron Hayes. So he's got the NFL background, the middle pedigree there. You have to like that. He is special. And now I think he comes in as 1A to 1B with Jordan Marshall at Michigan. I think that they're going to get that usage that you see from Michigan running backs. With Underwood there, it's a whole new thing, because I could usually just say, oh, Michigan's not going to have a good quarterback, so they're just going to get the ball to every running back, so you're going to see a ton of volume. But I think that is interesting to kind of see how that offense kind of flows with Underwood in there now. But he's going to get a lot of volume. I mean, he's going to get it. I think him and Marshall are going to be there, and he could definitely jump up. So I understand what you're saying, but I think from just a health perspective, I think that's why I would have Haynes at 5. And Baxter a little bit down, but Baxter could definitely bounce back. I think there's definitely that part of it. But I will also say Texas has a running back coming in that I really like, at James Simon. He's a freshman, and I think that is going to be something that you have to watch out for Baxter. Michigan doesn't really have that. Michigan's best running back, Jasper Parker, Donovan Johnson, those guys. It's going to be Haynes and Marshall there, from what we see. That's how I would kind of look at the two there.
Yeah, I like that. And with the injury bug and running backs, you never know how that all plays out. You think about traits, you think about all those things, but if a running back keeps getting injured, then you do have to knock him a little bit. And the hope is just that he comes back and he's strong as ever. And you could see what he did his freshman year. You can see him going forward. But the next guy, oh, sorry, yeah.
No, I was gonna say, can you tell me why you hate Jeremiah Love? Can you tell me why?
No, I love Jeremiah Love, actually. No, the next guy, I'm gonna let you talk about Nate Frazier. But okay. Jeremiah Love is the guy I want to talk about next. I think he's really good player. He's 6 foot, 206 pounds. This will be his 3rd year. He played his first year. He played as the number 2 behind a guy named Audric Estime, who not well known before the season, but by the end of the season, kind of like with Jonathan Brooks, had just a really, really nice season for Notre Dame. Really, really took off. But he actually did fairly well behind Audric Estime. Was that second guy in year 2? He really did have a breakout year. 234 attempts, 1,100 yards, 17 touchdowns. It really looked the part. I mean, he was out there hurdling guys. It was fun highlights, fun film, fun season to watch from him. He did at the last game of the season, regular season, he did suffer a knee injury against USC, and he kept re-injuring that. You saw him throughout the playoffs when everybody in that prime time, after this great regular season, the prime time, you see him in the playoffs, he's got that brace on the knee. It doesn't exactly look like it did for that regular season. And he kept, what seemed to happen is felt like he kept injuring it. In the quarterfinal game against Georgia, again in the Sugar Bowl win over Penn State, it just felt like it just kept happening. This will be an interesting year for Notre Dame. You got a new quarterback there. You still got some pretty good receivers in Jaden Greathouse and a couple of transfer wide receivers in there, Malachi Fields and Will Pauling, who had decent seasons last year. It'll be interesting to see how that, the quarterback plays out, how the offense is. But I think they'll heavily use Jeremiah Love again this season, and probably in store for another great season. Get healthy, get another great season out there. I really do I think Jeremiah Love is worthy of a decent Devy pick.
Yeah, no, I think the reason why I joked is that I think people are going to have him as their one, and we don't, and I think
Yeah.
it's going to be like, okay, well, I know you have him there. I think the two guys that I have ahead, I just think I value him more from a traits perspective from an NFL side, even though maybe the production for Frazier hasn't been what Love's production is. It's hard though because that injury definitely hurt him, right? That's what happened in that like the Ohio State game. He only had 4 carries that game. I think if he's healthy, I think that's a different game. And it may be a little bit of a closer game, even though they kind of pushed it towards the end, but it wasn't really that close. I think Love can be that guy. He's probably going to get less usage though. I think that when you're looking at Notre Dame and what they're going to try to do next year, I think it is going to have to be more of like a running back by committee, just by default, maybe of the quarterback position, depending on where they go there. So I like Love. I think he's got great traits. I think that he can be a 3-down guy, right? Like, because his receiving profile is fun. That's why he's in my top 3, because he does have those catches, those yards there from the production standpoint. The question is going to be, all right, now that you do this, what's your testing going to be? What's your testing numbers going to look like at the combine? What is that going to look like? I think is the biggest thing, but we still like him. He's still our top 3. He's in our top 3 there. And a lot of guys didn't have him in their top 5 last year. I know a lot of analysts out there when we're looking at rankings. So I find him fine at 3. I think that he's going to be, we've seen Notre Dame running backs do well in the NFL too, right? We'll just say Kyron Williams, a guy like that. You're like, yeah, hey, he definitely has that production standpoint. So yeah, I like that. Love is there. We'll talk about the next 2 guys. So why don't you get into Singleton, and then we'll move on to our profiles.
Okay, yeah. So Singleton, I got him as my 1. You got him at 4.
Yeah.
This is a this is an interesting profile. So he had an incredible freshman year. Really got all the metrics out of the park. A down sophomore year, and we liken that to potentially being injured. So it's one of those profiles where really good freshman year at the very top of Devy ranks. What happened in year 2, because it wasn't really talked about from that much on the injury perspective, to a very good bounce back year 3 and hitting a lot of metrics that I look for. Really, really interesting type of profile. He would have probably been sort of kind of like tier 2-ish if you came out this year. And so I really wanted him to come out this year. I was getting really excited about his profile as somebody that we would like in this year's class. So really, we're so far in his career, he has about 500 attempts, nearly 3,000 yards rushing, 32 rush TDs, averaging close to or nearly 6 yards per attempt. This is what really popped off in year 3. Total career 78 receptions for 767 yards, but year 3 stood out tremendously from a pass game perspective. He was the guy running down the field, running sometimes even routes actually as a running back, and catching the ball from Drew Aller. And guess what? The band's back again. Drew Aller's back. His backfield running back, Katron Allen, who can take some of that, like the dirty work at the running back position, those runs up the middle, that dirty type stuff, the stuff that you can get injured on. I see this as a split backfield where Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen sort of have a similar roles as they did last year, with Drew Aller passing and Singleton, barring Tyler Warren, who played all positions for Penn State last year, Singleton may have been their second best pass catcher on the field right after Tyler Warren last year. And that sort of upside is tremendous for me. I think that he has all the traits that NFL evaluators are look for. He has really good age-adjusted production, especially that first year. And you're seeing some of that bounce back in year 3, especially the ability to catch passes out of the backfield. So if he has another year like that, displaying some of those traits, not getting a tremendous amount of wear and tear because you share the backfield with another decent running back in Katron Allen, and because the gang's all back together, you get that sort of relevance out there, potentially being one of the better teams in the Big Ten, probably making the playoffs again, and maybe getting a decent sized run. I think Nick Singleton will be showcased throughout that whole time. So I like him. I like him a lot. I think he's number 1, but if you were really to press me, 1, 2, and 3 are very similar for me. That's like sort of my tier there.
Mhm.
And I like all three of those guys. Those guys, you can pick one versus the other. That's fine by me. But this is the way I got it ranked right now.
Yeah, and just so everybody on the podcast can remember, his top three were Singleton, Darius Taylor, and Jeremiah Love. And we're going to talk about Taylor here in a minute. We're going to finish off with his profile. I like all those things you said about him. I have him at 4. One, I'm a little worried of what the NFL thinks of him, because I feel like he would have got the grade that he should have got, right? Unless Franklin did some voodoo NIL and said, hey, just come back to Penn State and you can just make this money. Like, I feel like the NFL said that he was day 2, he would have been gone. Like, I really do think that he did. So if the NFL is not telling him that, and the NFL makes mistakes, so I'm not just basing it all on that. I think a couple things I want him to work on. I think consistency in that offense. Like, hey, where were you going to see that consistent production there? I don't necessarily love that Allen's back, because I would love to see Singleton do it by himself, or have that kind of role where he can be that 3-down guy and not rely on Allen. From a running standpoint, I think that there's times where Singleton tries to bounce it or look for space too much. I would love to see him more just go up the middle, get those tough yards. Don't underestimate, your ability to gain those yards in between contact. I think he did it a lot better his sophomore year. This last year, he did it okay. I think his freshman year was the worst year. Every time this kid grabbed the ball, he just bounced it outside every single time. So he's developed there. So from a running standpoint, I just want to see more consistent. I think he can be more decisive as a runner. Like, hey, hit that hole, go. Just because you're going to get minimal games possibly on those, like, you can still be a productive runner, get 4 or 5 yard carries. And that's what the NFL is going to want to see. You're not going to be able to bounce it out against NFL level defenses. So for me, Singleton, that's why he's down a little bit. I think I'm a little worried about his draft capital. He's, to me, like, and he's an older prospect, so I'm going to lean Jay's like, hey, 4-year kid here. I think if I can move off of Singleton, I would. I think if someone has him as running back 1 like Jay, I would look to go try to trade him to Jay. Like, that's just where I'm at. And if I can get something else, I'm okay pivoting it off of Singleton. I still have him in my top 4. I still think he is a very good back. But I think of these 5, from a red flag, like, I'm nervous about, I'd say Singleton is my biggest I'm nervous about prospect in the top 5, because of those things that we were saying. He's the older prospect. I don't think he has the traits that Justice Haynes has. I understand from a production standpoint, he's definitely outdone Justice Haynes, but I've never seen Singleton be like, whew, man, that kid had it in high school. He did, but at Penn State, I've yet to see that. He has some big runs, and he does that. It's just the consistency I think I want a little bit more out of him. But I don't mind him being one for you. Like, you come back to this in the next year, and I'll look like a dumbass as he's running back 1 of the class coming out. But those are my big concerns. Now, he can shadow those. He can come out and play better. That's the whole point of this. But that's probably why I don't have him in my top 3.
Not saying they're the same, but last year we had a similar situation with Travion Henderson. Mm-hmm. And, really good freshman year, top of the class from a Devy perspective. Not, because of injuries or whatnot, not as great years 2 and 3, but still really productive, still showing NFL. And then you have him come back for the 4th season and, go all the way and win the national championship. But Henderson really, really improved his draft stock throughout that whole time, because he was getting the chance to showcase that on a national stage. And this is kind of the arc. I'm not saying they're the same player, but it's kind of like the arc that I can foresee. And if that's the case, out of these guys, I kind of like that. If that really does play out, that situation for him.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say is I think I knew Henderson was a stud after his freshman year, of like, wow, this kid is special. Yeah. And then the injuries held him back a little bit. Where Singleton, I know he's been injured, like, so I don't want to take that away from him there, but I don't think he had the same extent of injuries with Henderson like that. So that's the one thing I would say back. Yeah. But again, that's why we do it. We'll see. All right, let's profile 2 guys. I'm gonna start with mine. Nate Frazier, he was a freshman last year. He's a sophomore this year at Georgia. He sits there at 5'10", 210. I bet you, though, Georgia's weight program, 215, 220. He'd probably be 220 by the beginning of this year, if I had to guess, just based on history and especially the position. They like to get their guys bulked up a little bit. This last year, he played in 13 games. He had 133 attempts, 671 yards, and 8 touchdowns. And to be honest, I thought he was the better running back between him and Trevor Etienne. I don't know why Trevor Etienne got all the usage that he got, because at times I'm like, man, when you're looking at this, Nate Frazier's their guy, like especially when he was injured or he got suspended. Etienne got suspended the first game against Clemson. Frazier came out at 83 yards, a touchdown, and everybody's like, man, who's this kid? And then Kirby, in all his infinite wisdom, decides, hey, let's just give him basically 16 carries over the next 3 games. And then that is just weird to me in terms of the volume. Down the stretch, though, they kind of leaned on him, especially when each team was out. Florida, 19 carries, 82 yards, and another touchdown. Ole Miss, kind of a bad game for Georgia all around. He had 12 attempts there. That's it for 47 yards and a touchdown. But against Tennessee, Georgia Tech, he had a good game. Obviously, UMass, he crushed. Against Texas, he looked explosive too. But again, the volume, he didn't get the carries, right? He had 47 yards against Texas on just 6 carries. So the thing with me with Frazier is I really think that he screams running back 1 to me in terms of Georgia's offense now. When you're looking at Georgia and what they're going to be next year, I think they're going to lean on Frazier a lot in that running back room. And just overall that depth chart, you have to look at it and just say, hey, I believe in that depth chart. I believe that Nate Frazier can win it. So that's kind of what you want to look at too. I think he's talented. I think that, he's going to have 1,000 yards next year easily. Roderick Robinson's behind him, but he's been banged up. Branson Robinson has not been able to be healthy, unfortunately. Chauncey Bowens is there, and I know a lot of people like Chauncey Bowens coming in the last year too. But to me, Nate's their guy. And in this offense, you want the running back there, depending on what they're going to have at quarterback. Is it going to be Gunnar Stockton? How's that look? If it is, I think Nate Frazier can lead this team in yards on the ground, especially, but also I think he can have all scrimmage yards. I think that he is a good receiver. You just didn't see it last year. So to me, this just screams opportunity. Did show some, showed some run this year as a freshman. Had that production there, and now you're looking for that next step. So similar to Justice Haynes, kind of how his freshman year went. Now you hope his sophomore year goes better. Like you're hoping your sophomore year gets to 1,000 yards there. I was kind of a wimp. I did have him at running back 1 for a little while this offseason, but I temper those expectations a little bit. But I still think he's talented, and I think that he could be that next running back that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I like it. He had a really great freshman season. I think that numbers-wise, he outproduced Trevor Etienne, and I thought that was surprising. I think that's interesting. Whatever you think of Trevor Etienne, he was transferred in there. It was a pretty decent back.
Yeah.
And Nate Frazier definitely outproduced him there. The caveat here is, Roderick Robinson, Branson Robinson. Those are, highly regarded recruits and have been dealing with, there's others too, but the Georgia backfield is always plush with what's seemingly incredible running back talent there. But, if Roderick Robinson can stay healthy, how much does he eat into Frazier's workload? That's the only thing I'd say as like the opportunity perspective. But yeah, again, a guy in my top 5 probably is going to get that opportunity and probably does well given what we saw this freshman year. So I like him.
Yeah, I mean he's got that traits, the traits that you like to follow there. And I'm not as concerned about that running back room as you. I think that it's Nate's. If he wants it, you go get it. He's going to earn that. He's going to earn that volume. I don't know. Branson is someone. Gosh, if he just stayed healthy, that could be like the guy that you're like, gosh, because we've seen it for years now. We're like, God, just stay healthy, Branson. But Nate, to me, yeah, I think that he has it. When you're looking at just his speed too, like he registered, he's fast. Like he might be the fastest. He could be the fastest guy in this list of the top 5. Like you're looking at Nate Frazier being the fastest. Jay was making fun of his running style earlier before the show, saying he moves both his arms up and down the whole time. It's like the Rock'em Sock'em old Rock'em Sock'em robots, right? That's kind of how he runs. So go check out his film if you want to laugh a little bit, because I saw that. I was like, yeah, he does kind of look like the Energizer Bunny a little bit, but he's fast. He can get it, and I think that from this perspective, I think Georgia's going to be better next year on the up front, and I think from the running back room, I think they're going to prioritize that a little bit. So I like Nate in the top 3. I think Nate in top 3 is fine. I have him at 2. It might be aggressive, but he could be the running back 1 of the 27 class in 2 years. And you're like, yeah, I can see that. So that's why I have him valued the way I do. All right, let's go over Darius Taylor. So Darius Taylor is sitting there. He is my 1. He is Jay's, well, I can't remember now. 2?
2.
Okay. So very close. We have him in the top 2 here. So what do we take away from Darius Taylor at Minnesota this year?
Yeah, 6'5", 215 pounds. This will be his year 3.
6 foot. 6 foot. You said 6'5".
Oh, sorry, 6 foot.
That'd be a big ass
215
running
pounds.
back. That's like a Madden running back that we created like back in the day. 6'5", 215. But yeah, 6 foot, 215.
6 foot 215. Year 3, 342 attempts, 1,767 yards, 15 touchdowns. He has 65 receptions for 441 yards. His PFF rush grades for his 2 years are 84.8 and 83. The metrics that I look at, just kind of like Caden Durham, the metrics from PFF, like yards after contact, missed forced tackles, breakaway percentage, elusive rating, are adequate but not elite. But what is elite is that his age-adjusted metrics that I look at, like yards per team play, dominator rating, reception yards percentage, those categories on an age-adjusted basis for both year 1 and 2 are significantly above the bump. At times, like historically significantly above the line. So some of the best yards per team play numbers that you've seen for year 1. And it's when you're looking at it, it's like, here's the line and the dot is way, 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 way above the line. So that's the type of stuff that he's putting up here. There's lots of turnover on Minnesota's team this year. We got a new QB. I think it's a transfer, 3 new transfers on the O-line, 2 new transfers on wide receivers. But the story here for Minnesota, and I think will always be, is that Taylor is Minnesota's offense. And I presumably think that they will be Minnesota's offense again in 2025. It'll run through Darius Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
So the knock that I'd say for him this past season was he put up, almost 1,000 yards rushing, but a lot of that rushing production came versus some of those opponents that aren't the best opponents on the schedule. So when it came to playing against the highest level competition, call it Michigan, call it Penn State last year, against Michigan, he only had 36 rushing yards. He did put 2 TDs in, but he only had 36 rush yards. Against Penn State, 58 rush yards. So his best games were against Nevada, USC, Illinois, and he had 2 really strong games to finish out the season, one against Wisconsin and the bowl game against Virginia Tech, where he put up 113 yards and a touchdown as well. So, I mean, the guy, if you watch his film, if you watch the highlights, it looks special. The thing that I want to call, or the thing that I want to say, maybe it's a little hot takey or whatnot, but I think his path here is kind of a lot like what Ashton Jeanty is. Yes, he's playing in the Big Ten, and he will face some tougher opponents, but he is Minnesota's offense, and he's going to get a lot of run, a lot of usage, and he's going to be a big part of their offense again, sort of like what Ashton Jeanty is to Boise State. He's the most important player on the team, and he is the biggest part of their offense. I think that's similar to what Darius Taylor can do, and if he does that again in year 3, I think he has a path to sort of go off and sort of just own Minnesota's total offense and just be such a large part of the total offense that it's significant and it stands out. So that being said, Minnesota's offense is not known for being sort of a high flyer, high scorer type of group. But I do think that Darius Taylor would just be such a large part of the offense that it's going to stand out and be statistically significant. And sort of explain that, he does have a good probability to then go and be a good NFL player. But so far, nothing. We both years on all those age-adjusted metrics, very, very high, very much above the line on most of those metrics that I'm looking for. So it's a really, really great profile. If Nicholas Singleton didn't come back, I think Darius Taylor would be my number 1. He is often overlooked because he plays at a program like Minnesota, for guys like Jeremiah Love, for guys like Nate Frazier. There's other guys as well. But I do think Darius Taylor deserves to be like you have him as number 1. But I do think he deserves to be 1, 2, 3, somewhere in there. And when you're going through Devy drafts, keep an eye, because sometimes he's not flashy. He doesn't play at a flashy program. Sometimes he slips in those Devy drafts. And he's somebody I think you should definitely pay attention to and be very high on.
He definitely does. I think he does slip a little bit when you're talking about kind of where he's at in terms of Devy value. I have him at 1 because I think he's just a special back. I think that he can do everything that you're asking him to do. I think he's been banged up a couple times, right? So I think that's what happened his freshman year. He only had 6 games. If he doesn't get banged up that year, though, I think we're talking about one of the more productive running backs in college football that year. And then you're like, hey, this guy's probably going to shoot up rankings there. And just so you know, because I'm going to go through here right now, in that mock draft that I'm doing, just kind of looking and seeing where he went. And he has he not gone yet? Oh my gosh. So to Jay's point, going through that 10 route Devy mock that I'm doing here, he is still available in the 4th round. No way. Jay, am I crazy here?
Take him.
Yeah, it looks like, you know what? I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna take him, and then I'm gonna see if he's been taken. This is terrible podcast on YouTube right now. But yeah, if he's still available right there, like if you're looking at it and you're saying, hey, can I get Darius Taylor? And yeah, he's still available. So if you can get him in the 4th, 5th, 6th round in that range, I mean, that is the type of value that you're looking for when you're going over the running backs that have been selected right now. Love went 1, Singleton went 2, Haynes went 3. Nate went 4. And then the running backs, the freshman running backs, all have gone, right? So you're still looking at that. So Darius Taylor in the 4th round, that's good value there for could be the running back 1 of the 26 class. So that is incredible. And I think he does all the things well. 3-down guy. I think that he can catch the football. You saw that last year with the 54 catches there. And he is the only offense in Minnesota. I don't even think Minnesota knows how to play offense, but they have Darius Taylor. So they're going to use him, and that's where the usage is going to be. So those are top 10 backs in Devy. Obviously, we go deeper in our rankings. I mean, shoot, I don't know, like 60, 70, 80. We have a ton of guys in our rankings in terms of the Devy guys. So those are our top 10. If you want to see more of our rankings, you can find them in our Patreon. You can join that below as our combined Dynasty and Devy rankings here if you're watching on YouTube. But before we get out of here, we're going to talk quick about the freshmen, the incoming freshmen coming in, and just kind of talk about kind of where we have some of these guys. And this is very preliminary. We're kind of going through them as we go. Some guys are higher on other guys, and in terms of the running backs, it's all across the board. Some look at On3, some look at 247 Sports, some are grinding the tape themselves. It just depends on where you're at. So here's Jay's top 5 freshmen. Bo Jackson, Ohio State running back. Gideon Davidson, Clemson running back. Alvin Henderson's at 3 for Auburn. So I'm going backwards, just so you know. 5 is Bo Jackson. 4 is Gideon Davidson. 3 is Alvin Henderson from Auburn. Shakai Mills-Knight at Ole Miss is his 2. And Osman Cromar, I don't know how to say it, Florida State running back. He has him at 1. My top 5, I have Nolan James from Notre Dame at 5. James Simon at Texas at 4. At 3, I have Shakai Mills-Knight, Ole Miss. Alvin Henderson is my 2, the running back at Auburn. And in my number 1 is Bo Jackson from Ohio State. I am a fan of Bo Jackson at Ohio State. Unfortunately, he goes to the Buckeyes there. But any quick takeaways on your guys before I get into Bo Jackson and then we get out of here?
Chroma is an interesting one. He didn't make your top 5. My quick version of looking at the highlights, he looks kind of like really special. Just watching him run. He averaged 129 yards per game, 55 rush TDs, 40 receiving yards per game. He's going to FSU. He's 6 foot 215. That's an interesting one. His recruiting was like a little iffy, like how it went through his process, but I think he's something special. You're going to talk about Mills-Knight and Alvin Henderson, but I think those 2 guys, Mills-Knight is one thing that's interesting for me is the opportunity at Ole Miss, and he's a big guy. I think I was looking at Ole Miss profile him, and I think they had him at 220, which is another 5 pounds that from what you can see on the recruiting services site. Alvin Henderson had so much production in high school. 10,930 rush yards, almost 195 yards per game. An incredible amount of rush TDs. It's actually crazy. I had to double take there in terms of how much production he had. He's a little smaller, but that production I do think correlates and does, especially if he confirms in college, is a really interesting thing. I like Gideon Davidson at Clemson. Maybe we can talk a little bit about them as well, but he was very productive in high school as well. And my final one, Bo Jackson, watching him, the highlights that you see from him is really entertaining. He's a really good watch. I'll let you hit more on him because I want you to talk as much as you can about Ohio State players and the fact that he's your number 1 guy. makes him really interesting.
Yeah, so I did my process a couple months ago, and then I kind of go through it, and I watch him more, and I watch him more. And I'm gonna tell you right now, Bo Jackson, and I've been wrong before, so I want everybody out there to realize, like, I have been wrong before in these guys, and it's not an exact science, but Bo Jackson reminds me of Jahmyr Gibbs. Like every time I watch Bo Jackson play, he reminds me of vintage Jahmyr Gibbs in college, like 6', 205. So he's kind of got that smaller frame a little bit, probably at 5'11", 200 if I had to guess, which is Jahmyr Gibbs anyway. But when you're looking at just what he can do, I mean, he's just a phenomenal player to watch. He's one of my favorite watch lists in terms of like I've watched tape for a long time. He's that guy for me. Elite short area quickness. This dude gets up and goes and just makes guys miss. It's hilarious when you watch him there. In 2023, when you're looking at his junior season, he had over 1,700 yards, 30 total touchdowns, and he basically averaged 10 yards per carry. Dude was just incredible. So to me, when you're looking at him, I think that he can carve out a role. I know that we just talked about Peoples being there and Donaldson. Why can't he carve out a role next year? Maybe he does some special teams work. Ohio State kind of needs a special teams kid. I mean, I know they got the safety. I cannot remember his name. Who's their guy, Jay, that does punt returns?
Well, last year they had Brandon Innis do it, and the really specials.
Downs, right?
Caleb Downs.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
This is how much I hate Ohio State. I don't care about any of their players, except for on the offensive side because I draft them. So when you're looking at
he'll be our first round pick next year. So
he'll be a top 10 pick probably. When you're thinking of him, I mean, and he did make Bo Jackson did make the freaks list for 247 Sports in terms of their top guys that are just freak athletes. He's that. Like he has that ability. He can run through arm tackles even though he's smaller. He breaks tackles well. He has great athleticism. I think the thing is he's an athlete right now. So the one thing that I would say is like he's going to have to learn how to play running back at the next level. I think that, he does it based on pure athleticism, which I love. That's fine with me at this point because he's going to turn into that. But he was getting recruited by everybody. He had offers from Georgia, Alabama, all the big dogs, and he chose Ohio State for that obvious reasons. They developed their guys, and to me, he could shock some people. He's at running back 11 or 10 at composite 247 Sports, but to me, I think he's a top 5 guy. Like I don't care where you have a lot of these guys because it's basically pick your poison. But if I'm based on value and where he's going right now in drafts, he's still available in the draft that I'm in. I'm gonna take him with my next pick. If he's there still, because I think he's a value going ahead of other guys, right? I think some freshman running backs you get hurt on a little bit because you draft them too high. But if I have someone valued as highly as I do and I can get him for a value, I like that. Alvin Henderson's another guy. Mills Knight is one that a lot of people like. I have a lot of there's some friends of mine that play the format that don't do like this because they're not dumb like us. So they don't do content. They don't do anything like that. But they're enamored with Mills Knight. And these are guys that play for heavy money leagues, and they're drafting Mills Knight very high. They're running back 1 for a lot of people is Mills Knight. And they talk about that Ole Miss, hey, he's got the right ahead of him. That depth chart's open. He's special. Lane does find these guys. He found Judkins before Ohio State stole him, right? Like these are the guys that you see here for Mills Knight. And then the other 2 guys, I'm probably higher on Nolan James than some. But James Simon is kind of a special running back out of Texas. He's a lot of fun to watch too if you haven't taken a look at him.
Yeah, I like those guys. I haven't done as much work on James Simon and Nolan James, so I'll have to look at them for sure.
Yeah, go check them out. And that's why we do it. I mean, we ranked, so I'm putting them in the rankings as we speak, but I kind of have the top 37 right now as we're kind of going through them in terms of, I'm going to be putting them in our Dynasty rankings soon. Some other guys out there to kind of watch. I know we mentioned him earlier, Jasper Parker from Michigan, Donovan Johnson from Michigan. A couple of Harlem Berry at LSU. He's a smaller guy. But he is fun to watch. But I've been burned by LSU 180 running backs so many times that I just don't want to go there right now. Anthony Rogers can still be. I know some have him up there. Jordan Davison from Oregon is another guy that I know people have him pretty high. He's just fell outside my top 5 as well. Akelin Deer from Alabama is another one that people really like high there. So there's a fun running back class. I would say of the freshman ranks that I've done so far, I like the running back class, but there's a lot of question marks. There's a lot there. I think the quarterback class as a whole for the 2028 group is my favorite part so far, just because I think there's a lot of talent there. So there's still time to tell here, but the running backs are fun.
Yeah, and I would echo those sentiments. We're going to talk about wide receivers, I think, next week.
Yeah.
Which maybe there's some exciting guys there, but really it feels like the quarterbacks are the crown jewel of this class so far. But that doesn't mean that some of these running backs don't increase tremendously in value going forward, because there's some interesting ones and pretty cool ones in this group. So I like this group.
All right. Well, that's our running back rankings here. Lollapalooza, or however the young kids call it. We're going through the Devy running backs, kind of looking at their rankings. We will do wide receivers, as Jay talked about. And in the wrap up this month, or ish month, of whatever we call a month, we're going to be doing a big Devy draft, 10 rounds. We're going to be looking at Devy values, Devy, all for you guys, free for you guys to kind of look through as the offseason goes. So be on the lookout for that. If you like Devy, leave a comment below. Who are your teams? Where are you at there? Hit that like and subscribe button. We'll check you guys on the next show.